First of all, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence this morning. Thank you for making the time on this not too cold, but still pretty chilly Thursday morning. On behalf of the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs, I'm honored to welcome you to the inaugural session of our G20 Entrepreneurial Learning Series. Formally, I think many of you know that ANDI is a network organization with almost 300 members who support entrepreneurs who aspire to end poverty in developing economies around the world. In South Africa, that primarily looks like our township economies. But as many of you probably have learned over time, if you have been in the ANDI network, ANDI is not just in the business of building ecosystems. We are in the business of building bridges between the world as it is and the world as we wish it were. Through this learning series, we aim to spotlight the bold ideas and to bring out challenges and to collaborate in finding solutions that can shift not only the narratives, but the systems that undergird entrepreneurship in our country and in the wider Pan-African community. And we are delighted to begin this journey with an episode that is led by our partners at Anzisha, an organization whose work has consistently expanded the possibilities for how we see, support, and invest in youth-led entrepreneurs across the continent. Our theme today, Youth-Led Economic Transformation, Unlocking the Township Generation, is not just a title. It is a provocation. It is a call to action. It invites us to rethink the role of young people in Africa's economic future, not just as recipients of opportunity, but as creators of it, and not just as beneficiaries of policy, but as the shapers of it. And it is on that we brought you all here today, to help us ideate the policies we wish to see enacted in the ecosystem for young entrepreneurs. We are gathered here again under the banner of the Y20 priority on inclusive economic growth and employment, with a specific focus on youth entrepreneurship in townships and informal contexts. It's a conversation that pushes us to look beyond the polished, and they will be polished, pitch decks and prize ceremonies, though we do appreciate those. It asks us, what does it take to build real, sustainable, locally rooted economic participation for young people? So today we will be exploring that question through two scenarios by looking at what is the status quo that we are currently operating under, and what are the factors that contribute to it staying that way? What parts of it do we want to change, and what parts of it do we want to improve upon for the future? And then we will explore an opportunity to look at what would the environment in which entrepreneurship for the youth is actually grounded in ideas and in principles that actually serve the youth look like. And we would like to invite you to help us actually create that vision. We know what the problems are generally. Everybody has seen what limited access to finance looks like, what education systems that are out of sync with entrepreneurial realities look like. We know that youth voices are sidelined in decision-making spaces. But we also know the possibilities. We know that vibrant businesses bring life to the economy. We know that job creators as young as 16, as you will learn through Anzisha's research, actually are the backbone in many ways of our communities. And we know that communities where entrepreneurship is, and so with that, we want to build communities where entrepreneurship is not just a fallback when people cannot find a job, but it becomes a first choice. In what world is that the possibility? So to begin today, I would like to invite us to be aware that this is not just a dialogue. It's not, you will see that there will be no panels here today. It is a working session for all of us because it's designed as a designing laboratory where you, the stakeholders within this ecosystem who hold the expertise, get to be part of the building of the future. So with that, I would like to welcome our lead organization for this session, Anzisha. Dave.
Morning, everybody. We've got a very exciting morning packed for you, ending off with lunch. So we're going to need a lot of energy. As most people have had coffee already, which is great. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for coming. We've got a really good turnout. And thank you for everybody for coming on time. We appreciate it. And we're going to get going. Okay, so my name's Dave Tate. In my previous life, I was a teacher. Okay, so I'm going to treat this like a workshop that's led by a bunch of people who are super engaged, okay, and want to change the world. That's the kind of student I'm used to working with, okay. So I want lots of energy today, lots of involvement and engagement. Okay, so those are my expectations. Cool? Okay. Okay. I'm just going to go through what the morning looks like. We should end up around 12, so we've got enough time to network and have lunch, and then everybody's got the afternoon free to catch up on your emails, etc., etc. We're going to try and keep this as tech-free as possible, okay, because it's very hands-on. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about what Anzisha does and what the objectives are for today. We're going to look at two different scenarios. The one is status quo. We'll talk about that in the room. And then we're going to go into the ideal scenario. We're going to break you out into outside, and you've each been assigned a group. Okay, you've each got a piece of paper, and there's a number on that piece of paper. That's kind of your guide for the ideal scenario, prioritization mapping, and recommendations. Okay, so those are the three things you need to focus on later on. Okay, I'm going to repeat that a couple of times. Just remember, you've got three things to do. Okay, and then we should conclude and do next steps, probably wrap up about, come back in here around 11:30. Okay, we're going to debrief. We're going to ask each team to have a representative that shares out 1 or 2 recommendations, depending on how much time we have. Okay, all right, we've got guides. People will help you. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about what we do. So Anzisha has been around since 2011. We started off as strictly a prize for young entrepreneurs across the continent between the ages of 15 and 22. Okay, we found these people. We had a massive amount of prize money because we wanted to share their stories. That was the initial plan. Okay, we've evolved since then, and now we run 3 different programs aimed at very young entrepreneurs. Our flagship program is a 2-year fellowship, which we have 40 people in each cohort. They come from across the continent. We deliver content in all 4 languages, Arabic, French, Portuguese, and English. And everybody is below the age of 22. Okay, we actually have Laboni, who's one of our fellows in the room. She is representing Africa's youth today. Okay. Okay, so we've got a couple of hundred fellows. Most of them have, and this is from 2011 up to date. We're growing with additional programs. We're able to put those numbers up to almost 300 per year across our different programs. Okay. The nice thing about our programs, it's very incentive based. Okay. So in other words, if you do the program, if you do the work, if you do the coaching, if you give us your data, we will provide incentives through money. Okay. That actually helps the business go. Okay. The other aspect of Anzisha is we've got loads of young people, okay? And we believe that telling their stories is critical in order to influence other young people to choose entrepreneurship as a career trajectory, okay? As the main thing that they want to do in the future, okay? After this, please subscribe and like our YouTube channel. No, really, we're at about 106,000 subscribers already. We'd really like to get it up to 200,000 before we get to Summit. It's got really great episodes about young entrepreneurs. Okay, well worth watching. Okay, so this is what we're going to figure out today. Objective 1, we're going to understand what the current status quo is. Okay, Razan's going to lead that. Objective 2, we're going to go outside, sticky notes, it's going to be fun, it's going to be high energy. We're going to start figuring out like what are the potential solutions that we want or activities that should happen if we want to reach this ideal scenario, okay? Like this bright, shiny future that we want to have. And then 3 is we want representatives to come up here, pitch their recommendations. Okay, it's going to be short, probably like 2 minutes each. Can be very brief, and then we're going to capture all of that, and obviously that will be considered by Y20. But it's also going to lead into the annual conference, which is happening in October, later on. Okay, is that clear so far? Give me a thumbs up if you're kind of tracking. Cool. Okay, Rizan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rizan. I'm with Nzisha. And before we get into the status quo scenario, I just wanted to give you guys some data points from our recent research. We're currently undertaking a research series around support systems and support mechanisms for very young entrepreneurs. So really assessing if the entrepreneur ecosystem is sufficiently supporting the young entrepreneurs that are at the forefront of our economies. And so looking at this slide, I just have some very high-level key challenges that very young entrepreneurs face. And when I say very young entrepreneurs, I mean age 15 to 22, or 15 to 25, apologies. So the first one is access to finance and capital. So very young entrepreneurs often face high startup costs with their businesses, often inhibiting them from even beginning the business to start. Also, a lack of collateral and credit history makes it very difficult for entrepreneurs to get started. With that, there's the reluctance of financial institutions to provide the capital needed to start their businesses. Second is the credibility and trust issues. There is a lot of age-related bias by different stakeholders and even customers of the goods and services that these VYEs provide. With that, this creates a need to overcompensate and prove their credibility to the stakeholders involved within their businesses. Third is familial and societal pressure. So for the families of these VYEs, it's often very hard to see their child go through the challenges of creating a business. And so with that, they see that entrepreneurship is not a viable career choice. Third, is systemic and regulatory barriers. So while these barriers do apply to all entrepreneurs, we believe that the biggest burden, or that VYEs bear the biggest burden of these barriers. So this is high compliance cost, weak supply chains, unreliable suppliers, as well as political instability within some countries within the continent. Fourth is skills and infrastructure gaps. So with VYEs being very new to entrepreneurship as a whole, the skills necessary in the business experience is often lacking when first beginning the business, as well as a lack of infrastructure facilities to hold the goods and services that they are providing, as well as limited networks and connections within the ecosystem, making it hard to really get started and thrive within the market. And along the lines of markets, there's market access and adoption barriers. So limited market access leads to slow adoption of their goods and services, as well as competition from businesses with market power. Similar to systemic and regulatory barriers, these do exist for all entrepreneurs, but I believe the challenge is especially heightened for very young entrepreneurs. And so these are some of the key challenges that VYEs face based on the research that we're currently undertaking. And so now getting into the status quo. So we've drafted a statement that we believe encapsulates the status quo of very young entrepreneurs. But with that, it's not just about the challenges that they face, but how we are striving to address those challenges. And it's really questioning whether youth are at the center of these systemic changes. And so the statement reads, youth are invited to participate in isolated short-term initiatives, accelerated programs, prize pitches like Nzisha, but lack integration in core decision-making and systems change. And so we often think of this as tokenized participation. They're invited to show face, but they don't necessarily have a seat at the table. And so my question to you all for this group discussion is, do you agree with this scenario? And why or why not? And given just the diversity of this group, and we all come from various organizations and different stakeholder groups, I'd love to hear some examples about how you see this scenario play out in day-to-day life. So, yeah.
Good morning. My name is Taban Sasa, and I work for African Leadership Academy. Yeah, I agree with this, and I would give a couple of examples. One example is Ludwig Marishane, who came up with a dry path. All he did in most of his startup journey was to pitch his idea to raise funds. And from those pitching competitions he won, at no point there was an exit strategy to help him out to bring the idea to life. That was one of the most bright test ideas, I believe, in the country, but the lack of support forced him to continue going to business competitions, and that's how he actually raised funds. If you can read about his story as a young entrepreneur who was in school at the time or university at the time, that's all he had to do, to look for pitching businesses, competitions, so that he can have startup capital. Another example which I shared with my colleagues right at the back is that between 2011 and 2014, I was part of a mentoring group where we were supporting about 40 in-school learners who were invited by a corporate. I don't want to mention names. And all they had to bring is an idea that has the potential to grow. And as they were pitching these ideas, the winner gets 60,000, 20,000, and 10,000. But what was interesting was that the prices were geared towards their tuition at university and not so much to bring the ideas to life. One of the boys I met in that particular group, it was the 2013 group, he actually now supplies macro. He manufactures low pressure cookers. So the ones that you'll see at macro made of cotton or wool type of a thing, that's a boy from Limpopo who came up with that and is actually supplying whole macro, and now he's supplying in other countries, in southern countries and some European countries as well. So the frustrations has always been around how do we then have an ecosystem that sort of integrates and has an exit strategy. We work in silos. So if I run an entrepreneurship school, there's no incubator that will sort of think about to say, I run an entrepreneurship school. How do you guys come to the table so that we can be able to have an exit plan? Because chances are, if you have 10, 1 or 2 will be thinking, I want to start my business. But there's only that support you can provide, because you also have to have an exit or where you end of support. So that alone, particularly for out of school youth, there's a lack of support. And now, right now, because of the in-school entrepreneurship that is currently up and running and every organization is talking about, we are seeing a rise in pitching competitions. And after that, they die. So a lot of ideas die in pitching competitions and they don't really come to life post-pitching. So that will be really interesting as well in your research to figure out some of these pitching competitions and how many of those actually come to life. Another example that maybe we may think about is the Department of Education entrepreneurship programs that they run. They always have pitching competitions, but we've never really gotten to see some of those ideas come into life because they do have inter-college or university competitions. But how many of those come to life? I think that's where we fail to support the very young entrepreneurs.
Thank you. My name is Odette Crofton, and building on my colleague here, I don't think it's the young entrepreneur's fault. I think it's the environment and the system that we created. The example I would reference here is the South African Enterprise Supplier Development Program that ends up taking an entrepreneur from training to training to training to training, and they never actually launch and get to run their business and get market access that'll help them to grow and develop and really have impact at the end of the day. So we've created a system where the support entities just need to answer to the tick box and are not responsible for the ultimate impact, growth, and development. So we need to reshape the system to focus on impact, growth, and development, not the micro steps in between. Because the micro steps, pitching, competitions, whatever, they do that very well if you tell them to do it. But the outcome and the impact, they're not doing that, they're not achieving that, because they're not incentivized to focus on that. When you talk to your youth businesses, they'll tell you we go from training to training to training, but what they actually need is the mentorship, the patient capital, the longer term support to get them through to the point where they can develop and grow. So I'm kind of yes and no on your statement. The first part is happening because of the system. The second part, the lack of integration, decision making, it's again the system, but it's also we've created that environment. So the entrepreneurs are just responding to the environment that's been created.
Okay. My name is Sino, and I'm from the Graça Machel Trust. And I do agree with the statement, but the trust decided to rather look at impact and outcome because we wanted to mitigate this very situation. So we have a cohort of about 900 entrepreneurs, and out of that, about 40% are youth. And what we've done is we've introduced programs such as job creators and jump starter competitions within the capacity building program that we provide. We also focus a lot on leadership and personal mastery, but the purpose of the jump starter competition is for the entrepreneurs, especially the youth, to innovate, and for the job creator competition to say, how do you as a youth or as an entrepreneur incorporate youth employment as part of your business strategy and business model? So that then what we've seen actually is that then they take agency of their growth, of their business, and we support them through technical coaching in terms of market access, access to finance, and mentorship. And so it's a 360 view to say that we invest in you, but you also have to have accountability. You have to run the business, and we give them the opportunities in the pipeline of ecosystem support and partnerships, and we measure that. And we've seen that in the last, say, 18 months that we've started the program, there has been an increase in terms of confidence, but not only that, there's been an increase in terms of revenue as well as job creation. So it's important to, I think, look at a 360 support process, but to also say, how do we as ecosystem partners make a change? Yes, we understand the status quo, but then how do we add value and measure output and impact in terms of what we're doing? Thanks.
Hi, good morning. My name is Hope Donga, and I'm representing the Youth Employment Services. It's a fairly young NPO that is private sector led, and since 2019, which was the inception, we have placed 190,000 South African youth between the ages of 18 and 35 into a 12-month working experience, which is quite a mile for us. And we're in partnership with about a network of 1,800 corporates in South Africa. And what we found from our database and from our states is that, 75% of the young people that we support or our beneficiaries are from grant-led households. So they are grant beneficiaries. And, the impact, trying to look at the impact of our program, about 45% of our young or youth beneficiaries go on to be absorbed in those companies that they are placed in, which is quite amazing. But then we also have a small amount, which is 17% of our youth after the 12-month program go out to open their own businesses. And so what we said is yes, and decided to do was that, it's amazing that we also have this small ecosystem of young entrepreneurs, from gaining a 12-month working experience and saving up the little that they could save to open up their own businesses. What can we do to sort of support that. So to the question there is that I agree that that's the system, and that's how the system is. But and I'll say no, because I'm now part of the solution, to say we are not just leaving these SMMEs to pitch. We are allowing them to pitch. We are taking them through an incubation program of about 12 months, and we are providing both financial and non-financial support, because we understand the benefit of a 360 support group, not just handing them money, because most of these young people don't know what to do with the money that they get. And then we're taking them through to say, these are the legal services that we provide. You need accounting services, because some of them don't even know how to balance, financial statements at that very young stage. And so this is the support that we offer them, to say, even beyond this 12 months working experience and the 12 months business incubation, we are also partnering with a network of our client base to say, what else can scale these SMMEs? And one of the big drivers of scale or growth for young SMMEs is, corporate supply chain opportunities. So I'm saying it's possible for us to eradicate such a status quo, but it can only happen through intentional and strategic partnerships like we have done with Sanlam and other of our corporates. Thanks.
Thank you all for sharing. I think a common theme is that you can't just have one-off experiences and support mechanisms for young entrepreneurs. It really needs to encompass everything, have that 360 view. And I like what you said about the work is being done to kind of mitigate this and have change, sustainable funding and support for young entrepreneurs. And so I think that's actually a perfect transition for the ideal scenario that we will get into in breakout groups. And I'll let Mr. Dave, Teacher Dave, explain.
Okay, cool. Thanks for the comment. I think there's a lot of momentum happening. We're all in this ecosystem. We're all doing things. I think an opportunity is for today is actually to learn more about what are people doing. So I want to kind of take us into the creative kind of innovative space. Okay. We've come up with this ideal scenario, and we haven't really tacked a time frame onto it, but let's give it 5 years. Okay, let's be ambitious. So the statement is youth, particularly townships and informal sectors, are enabled and empowered by African entrepreneurship ecosystem stakeholders to be embedded as policy contributors, fund recipients, and ecosystem builders. Okay. So if I had to summarize that, it means what this setting looks like right now, in 5 years' time, there should be 10 of us and 50 young people. Yeah? That's what it should look like. That young people actually driving the change that they want to see. Okay, so you've got this on your cheat sheet. Everybody's got a kind of a, there's a number on top of there, okay? So you're either a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5. Those are your groups, okay? So if you're a 5, you're in group 5. Okay, if you poke your head out the window, you'll see a couple of very basic flip chart papers, okay? That's 1, that's 2, 3 is somewhere there, 4 is somewhere there, 5 is somewhere there. Okay, you're gonna be outside, you can leave your bags here, that's fine. We'll get sunlight eventually, but we want you to be standing, okay? If you're sitting, you're not really contributing, okay? It's gonna go really quickly, okay? So a couple of ground rules around brainstorming, okay? Because that's essentially what we're doing, okay? Build on other people's ideas. So I want to hear a lot of yes and, okay? I don't want us to get to the point where government is going to fix everything, okay? That is not, okay? If you come up on stage and you say, our recommendation is that the government is going to fix everything, that is not a good recommendation. Okay, you've got to think innovatively and creatively. If government is a hurdle, how do you work around it? Okay, how do you jump, what do you call it? Leap over it, yeah? Figure out ways, okay. We're not focusing on problems, we're focusing on solutions. Okay. All right, so you guys have probably got like 5 minutes. I don't want us to debate this too much. I think generally we're in good shape here with the ideal scenario. How you interpret that within your group, great. That's probably going to take you 5 minutes because we want to jump into this is the process, okay? So on your flip chart papers, you guys know who the stakeholders are, okay? The same space. We know that the policymakers, they're advocates for policy change. Those are two different people. They're ESOs, they're educators in high schools, etc., etc. There are funders, okay? There are different companies that actually invest in young entrepreneurs. There's a whole breadth of them, okay? So you can add and change, but what we want you to do is identify a stakeholder. Let's call them an ESO, yeah? I'm an ESO. An ESO should give access to more skills development on a completely free basis, okay? That is a typical activity that could help us get to this ideal scenario, okay? So you want quite a lot of sticky notes. Who the stakeholder is, what is the solution, okay? Then you guys, okay, so you're gonna do this, you're gonna brainstorm activities, lots of sticky notes. I want everybody to kind of get an opportunity to contribute, okay? So if you're talking too long, somebody in the group is gonna say, psst, I also wanna talk. Okay, we wanna keep it short and simple and brief. And then you're gonna map the priorities. Okay, so simple matrix. Something can be easy or something can be hard, okay? Sorry, something can be easy, something can be hard, okay? So easy at the bottom, hard is at the top, okay? And then we're looking at time frame. Like, can we do it now? Or is it gonna take 5, 10, 20 years, okay? You map your sticky notes according to where you think that solution should be on the matrix. Cool? Are you visualizing this? Okay, matrix, sticky notes, talking, ideas. Cool? Okay. All right. We will be wandering around. Razan, myself, Keza is also part of the team. Ahmed is also, but he's probably going to be in a group. We will help you when you get stuck. We're also going to push you along. Okay. We're going to like go, 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 go. At 11:30, one of your representatives will be saying, this is our top recommendation. We recommend that ESOs make a program accessible to more people for free, and that's going to take 3 years. Okay? We will document all the other stuff on the flip chart papers, but we want you guys to come up and present. Okay? We want you guys to kind of talk about what you're thinking about. Okay? So it's going to be super fun, super exciting. Nod. Say yes. Okay. And this is what we're going to do when you come back here at 11:30. Okay? Each group, 1 or 2 priorities. If you agree on a great priority, you can just tell us about 1. You don't need to do 2. Okay? And then obviously you're going to share back with everybody because we're going to come back in here. Does that make sense? Okay, can I do a quiz? I said I'm a teacher, yeah?
Is this for marks?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then the thumbs up, yeah. Okay. And then the team that does the best pitch, not the idea, just the best pitch, gets a prize. Okay?
Before you go, just one last recommendation, or rather reminder. So this whole conversation and the reason we your brain and your brainstorming and all your great ideas is because we are hoping to take these recommendations and pass them on to Y20, who's actually in the room, and they are going to, and Abin is going to be part of this conversation so that they can embed that in their recommendations into the G20 summit, into the G20 summit agenda. So please bear that in mind as well. So it's not a wish list. It is like, this is, the ones that come out of here are going to be taken and advocate for champions towards not just South Africa Consi, but global boss. So do consider these recommendations in a universal way. what is applicable for our context, but what is universally applicable as well for the other 19 countries, plus groups in the G20, because ultimately those are the organizations that have the better chance of making it onto the agenda.
So I'm very happy that everybody really got into this. There was some great conversations, and I think also just like meeting other people within the ecosystem has been awesome. You carry on the conversations over lunch, continue networking, continue kind of building what we have here. Okay, so we had 5 teams, good discussions. I have team number 1, then you're 2. Who's 1? Where's my 1 person? Come. Okay, so they're just going to pitch out, okay? If you want to take notes, please do take notes so you can carry on the conversation during lunch. We're not going to do any kind of Q&A. We just want to hear what each team came up with as their top prioritization, okay? Who are the stakeholders in that? And what's the time frame? And is it easy or hard? Okay? Okay. We got this.
Okay, good morning. Group 1 here, the winning team. All right. Okay, so our intervention is a global and development fund where we can source out numerous opportunities for the youth in South Africa and also globally, where it will also be inclusive, so it will be sector agnostic, so it doesn't have to be specific to one sector. And through those opportunities, the youth also will have access to more experienced entrepreneurs who are in the industry. Like, for example, if myself, I'm in the baking industry, there will be an experienced baker who specializes both in South African market as well as global market, and then they will assist me in terms of how I can get my products across, and then also factor in longer term funding that will be available in order for your business to be more sustainable in the next 3 years. The stakeholders involved is your political leaders, your private sectors, your private institutions, institutional institutions such as your banks or regulatory bodies, business forums, industry bodies, and as well as entrepreneurial support organization. How easy is this? Very easy. Can be implemented now. It just needs commitment and to put the right people in the right place at the right time. Yes to the winning team.
Hello, everybody. Sort of intimidated by that, but hey. So our solution involves the ecosystem that already exists. It just needs collaboration. So in terms of youth entrepreneurship or township entrepreneurship, we would then get young entrepreneurs in the township to collaborate and create one ecosystem that would sort of then inspire upcoming entrepreneurs or young people to join into the entrepreneurship sector. So basically entrepreneurship teamwork. Number 2 is market diversification, and then entrepreneurship education. It does already exist. We've got primary school that does market days. However, kids don't know that it's entrepreneurship. So just giving them the light bulb in their head that this could potentially be a career choice. And then the people that are involved or the stakeholders or policymakers, incubators, there's also one thing that we talked about is having a policy that allows pitching competitions to have a partner as an incubator or incubator partner, so that once a young entrepreneur wins a pitching competition, they can get support immediately from that sort of partnership. So entrepreneurship, policymakers are involved, incubators, the government, of course, and just entrepreneurship that already, or entrepreneurs that already exist, like us young people. So yeah. Oh, sorry. I didn't talk about how easy or hard it is. It is super easy because it already exists, and but time frame would take about 1 year, 2 years to get it done. Thank you.
Good morning from the winning team, Group 3. We also agree that we already have everything that is needed to implement. What needs to be done is basically just taking step back, restructuring our approach, and seeing how best to use what we have. The current ESD ecosystem that exists, bring everyone together, have people who have actually started businesses, run businesses, scaled up these businesses to be part of the leading team in terms of advisory, because we're finding that most ESD funding is actually led by people who have only been employees, and that is a problem, and it's something that is holding up entrepreneurship. We want consideration in terms of funding to be given to adjust the risk element. There is, in order to unlock innovation, we have to be willing to take bigger risks. So that's one of the things, and flexibility. And the cross collaboration, you find that the ecosystems have everyone, the different companies that are in the different spaces, but they don't know one another. So there must be that intentionality to bring entrepreneurs together to collaborate, and also prioritizing sector-led programs in order to be deliberate, to make sure that the companies move from one place to another, from one stage to another. In terms of how this can be done with immediate effect, you call a meeting as soon as we're done from here, and we begin the implementation of it. Even among within this room itself, if we were to pull in the resources that can be pulled from this team alone and begin to say, now let's shift approach, we'll see that happen. Over the long period of time, it will yield even more. So there will be success immediate and going into the future. What was the last question again? How easy or hard? I think I've responded to that. It is doable. And I think what it's requiring is all of us to shift our thinking patterns, be flexible, and be willing to adjust. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I think we're trying to showcase what ecosystem collaboration looks like. So I think for us, for our envisioned future, it really is not just about an enabling and empowering ecosystem, but it's one that is accessible and integrated, that drives policy contribution, access to finance, access to information, as well as access to markets.
So we had quite a few, not a lot, but a few ideas that we wanted to bring up to the group. But we thought that maybe the best one to share is the one that already exists, but how do we refine it? And we thought about a lot of youth who struggle with access to information, access to opportunities, access to collaborative spaces, etc. And our idea that we wanted to bring here was actually around bringing innovation hubs to the townships, to your peri-urban areas, to your marginalized communities, and really making them the core of opportunity for young people there. So we spoke about, the idea really of taking bringing the local to the national back to the local. This is that space where all can come together and convene. It's a space for information and opportunity for the youth in the community that they are in, especially, of course, for access to funding, but also a collaboration base, right, for your local business, your community-based organizations, of course, incubators. And I think this for us was something that we identified as, it was this quadrangle. So it was easy. a little bit in the middle, like in terms of hard, easy to hard, but can be done fairly quickly, right? And we thought that this would address a lot of the challenges when it comes to that ideal statement, and whether how do we truly achieve it in a pragmatic kind of way. And that's us. Thank you.
Hello. From Group 5, my name is Libwani. Our key recommendation is that maybe as a header, formalization is not the end goal. I think there's a stereotype or a misconception that informal settlements are incapable of building businesses and thriving and contributing towards our economy. But what people don't actually know is that these big brands or these big businesses that are located outside of the township, their consumers are from the township. They thrive in the township themselves. So our key stakeholders in this instant would be both private sector and public sector collaborating together. Government needs to change their policies and their procedures to accommodate informal settlements. And maybe we need to move away from this notion of informal settlements and start saying township economy. So they need to change their procedures. For example, CIPC, they have a lot of requirements that are unrealistic. They need to informalize their requirements so that people in the informal settlements can meet these requirements. And then private sector, they have a lot of resources such as finance and also implementation. They can implement this. I think another key would be, for example, Capitec. Capitec is a banking system that accommodates, informal settlements, and it's thriving as it is now. So I think another example that we did have is, for example, one of our team members brought up that there's a lady in the township who doesn't want to move away from the township because that's where her product is thriving. So we need to start enabling a lot of people who are in the township to stay in the township and to thrive there. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Super exciting. I've just got one last favor to ask from you. If you've got any sticky notes that you've got in your notebooks that you would please put them back onto your flip chart paper. We want to try and capture that because we've only heard a couple of recommendations, but there's probably a wealth of other ideas on the flip chart paper that we actually want to capture as well. Okay, so please, let's just make sure we do that. The Dave show is over. I'm going to hand over to Asilia to wrap us up.
Actually, hi everybody. And actually before I come on, you good? No? Yes? Okay. I wanted to, while we're still having this conversation and while it's still hot on the topic, I would love to invite Y20 to actually come up here and kind of contextualize it again for us. See how a lot of these conversations and how these recommendations are linking into what they're already thinking before we close it up. So if you would please welcome Y20 from
So, like I said, I serve as the co-chair of the Y20, which is the youth engagement group of the G20. But I think it's also important for me to note that I'm not here by myself. There are colleagues from Y20 who either serve in the technical task force working groups or the broader working groups. And I see Albert here, I see Livowani, and also Amina here. But in essence, colleagues, ours with this partnership with Andy, it made sense because so Y20, we are doing our work across 5 thematic tracks, right? So we got together last year as soon as we heard as young people in the youth development space that Y20 is coming to South Africa. We essentially organized ourselves, we mobilized ourselves, but also we really conscientized ourselves to say, let's do something about this Y20, right? Young people must lead this thing. And we really opened a South African writing group where we literally across all our youth networks in the country, whether you're from rural KZN or Eastern Cape, across all the 9 provinces, township, informal, suburbia, Sandhurst, wherever you are, we spoke with young people or people who are from those constituencies. And essentially our work is across 5 thematic tracks, right? Climate change and environmental sustainability, right? What are those green horizons? What do we mean when we're saying, we're leading a just energy transition? The second one, which I think speaks to this conversation that has brought us here today in this good company, is inclusive economic growth and employment, right? Many of us who follow the news would note that about 3 to 4 weeks ago, the Stats SA would have released the quarter labor survey. And again, it's us, young people, who are making the most noise in those stats, right? The third one is on AI, digital education, innovation, and the future of work. Essentially, what are the key competency skills that we're trying to equip our young people with as it relates to AI? But also, what are the ethical considerations that we need to consider around AI, given that, and I know some of you who are still doing university work at using AI to do your assignments, people have been telling us. The fourth one, really is on meaningful youth engagement and reforming multilateral organizations for a just future, which I do think to some instance also speaks to today's conversation and us gathering here, right? Is that young people want to participate, right, in these multilateral organizations, whether you are the UN agencies, the African Union, or the World Trade Organizations, or forums where decisions are being made on finance or on startups and so on. Young people say, we are here and we are ready, right? The last one, colleagues, as I wrap up, is really on inclusive social development and fighting inequality. And there we're really committed to say we're leaving no one behind, right? But perhaps let me link that last theme with today in terms of inclusive economic growth and employment, those pathways to prosperity that is, essentially brought this partnership with ourselves and Andy and the other colleagues who are the social partners in this, is that, we said, like I said, young people, we know what's happening in this country. We're not blind to it as it relates to the youth stats, as it relates to youth unemployment, right? I mean, I often say this and people think sometimes I'm joking. In 2011, and I said I'm going to wrap up, and I am wrapping up. In 2011, Celia and the colleagues from Anzisha, a young man by the name of Mohamed Bouazizi in Tunisia literally set himself on fire. And at the time in that country, 2011, by the way, right? At the time in that country, again, high unemployment levels and all those things, right? That would spark what we now know as to be, or what we now study as the Arab Spring, right? Jordan, Egypt, Libya, Syria, and some of the Middle Eastern countries. Colleagues, we know what's happening in Kenya. We know what's happening next door in Mozambique. We've seen what's been happening in Nigeria. We've certainly seen the silencing that's been happening in Eswatini, right? We know what happened in this country in July 2021, right? And we are seeing now what's happening with the current protest, in support of that specific, police general in case. We know what's happening now. And in fact, this is the week where I think it will be the 4th anniversary of the July unrest, right? I'm not suggesting anything, but perhaps, colleagues, are we at the tip of a southern spring? And I raise that because I do think we need to engage with those questions. We can't pretend like we don't see these things, right? I was listening to some of the inputs and, I think one young person spoke about how, we like to pretend like, even the informal economy, we don't see it, like we don't, informally, what's that thing? We only limit our imagination of the economy to JSC, like around the corner and all those things, right? And questions, that we are raising that have been raised specifically by Andy, but also by us in those negotiation rooms, but certainly by colleagues at Startup 20, is around what does inclusive economic growth look like? But one that doesn't leave everyone behind, right? Because colleagues, we, as young people, we are the largest demographic in this country. And for me, what I'm raising is it doesn't stop anyone with nefarious purposes and their own agendas to mobilize young people, right, for things that we would not want to happen in this country. And perhaps essentially what I'm trying to say is that we need a new language, perhaps a new social contract. Whether it's Anzisha, it's with Y20, I see the colleague here from Harambe Youth Accelerator, you're having extensive conversations with the presidency. Or perhaps it might be this national dialogue that is coming up. I'm not sure what platforms we must use, but I think we must use all these platforms in ways in which, again, we make sure that each and every young person, not only of this country, but I think also of the continent, because also, it's also important to underscore that our South African presidency of the G20 is also seen to be Africa's G20. Certainly in our negotiation rooms, one of the things that's also coming out powerfully across the 5 thematic tracks with our international delegates is perhaps we might need to lobby for the AU, given that AU is now a member state of the G20, to also host the G20 presidency. Because there are real fears. I mean, I can tell you now, I mean, in our international negotiations with the young people from, the other countries, I can tell you there are, areas of divergence where we're not finding each other. We're not finding each other on issues like languaging around gender, LGBTQI+, and human rights, right? And on climate change, we're not finding each other on issues of, debt for climate swaps, right? And these are things, we like to say, oh, young people are progressive. Way, come to our negotiations and you'll see. And again, and I know being progressive is a relative term, but I'm saying, again, if we're analyzing the current geopolitical times and climate that we're in, right, we cannot afford to be young people who say politics is not for me. You might say that, you might take that nice, position and say, I'm fine here in my little apartment, I'm good, I'm safe. But let me tell you, politics is playing around with you each and every day. From the price of bread, the price of fuel, there are people, the powers that be who are making decisions, and which has got us to be here where we are right now. So I'm grateful for this partnership, and certainly Y20 is grateful for this partnership because it not only allows us to come and engage on the ground and consolidate all these inputs into our policy recommendations, because yes, multilateral organizations, I won't lie, change is very much incremental. She's coming up the stairs, which is a nudge that we must wrap up. Multilateral organizations, change can be incremental, as in like very slow. But again, these are the steps that we're putting. And it's up to us as young people to negotiate in those rooms, to be in spaces like this, and to utilize partnerships like we have right now with Andy as it relates to inclusive economic growth and those pathways to prosperity, as we try to map what we need to do to make sure that our young people are out of the streets, that they're doing something with their lives, right? We understand that not every young person will go to university at TVET College. Some will be entrepreneurs, some will be, and we must encourage that, right? But again, what does inclusivity mean, right? In these current moments, right? How do we define it, right? So perhaps let me leave it there that we need that new language. I'm not fully certain, and I'm not sure of also what it is. I have some ideas, but I do think coming together in spaces like this, whether you're from business, civil society, academia, we all need to work together. This thing of working in silos, they must protest there by themselves. No, that's also your problem, right? We must deal with that, right? Every person in this country, I think perhaps maybe what I'm trying to do is we need to be called upon as citizens. And now is our time to be called upon as citizens, not as taxpayers, right? Let me leave it there because I can go on. Yeah, I can go on. Thank you so much. Cool. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think that was incredibly powerful and certainly a good reminder of why we're doing this. We really wanted this to not be a talk shop. We wanted this to be something that is leading towards something else. I just realized now I never actually introduced myself. I probably introduced myself individually to all of you as you were walking in, but my name is Urcelia Matalbisi and I am the regional chapter head for Andy in Southern Africa. Andy, as you already know, is very, very happy to have you all in this room. We pride ourselves for being conveners, for bringing various stakeholders with various perspectives and various interests, various goals and agendas into the same room. And I think that today we have succeeded on that. So there's a KPI box ticked. But most importantly, I think that Moketsi really brought it down. Why did we decide to do these series? And the reason really is a couple of things that he actually touched on. First, it is monumental for South Africa to be hosting the G20, not just for us as a country, but for us as a continent. And so we are very, very conscious of the fact that the voices that are going to be feeding into that space and into that conversation within, I have the privilege of also serving as a member of the Startup 20, and in there we keep being reminded that whatever recommendations we put forward have to be universal, and the word universal are really saying, encompassing and aligning with the interests of the other 19 groups. Now, the other 19 groups do not include any other African country other than South Africa. The other 19 groups have, yes, the African Union, but as you can see, I don't know, maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but when the African Union joined, they didn't change it to G21. So it still is G20 plus the African Union. So for us then, we took it as a real responsibility as a global network, but certainly as a network that is also engaging within the region to say, how do we bring in more voices? Because we also, again, it is a privilege to be able to serve in the Startup 20, but I know that although we have really great people in there, and some of them in the room, thank you so much for coming, there's still a lot of people who are not in that room, a lot of voices that we're not hearing there. And so this is what this is for. We wanted to have these conversations to make sure that we are not just echoing ourselves, but bringing some of these conversations into a broader group and bringing in recommendations that we can champion, knowing that they actually come from somewhere real. So to the point of broadening that, we're not just broadening that here. We're very, we're also, this series actually runs, this is the first episode. You guys have been our guinea pigs. And so we're very, very, very grateful for that. But in particular, thank you to Anzisha team, who has just kind of like, we've been throwing curveballs at them from the beginning. We started with one idea and then we changed to another and then we brought another one and then we almost had them do something huge and then something small. This thing has looked very different in many different ways. This one now marks a stake on the ground, and we're saying this is the model that we're gonna do it. We're gonna do 3 more of these in the beginning of August. On the 5th of August, we're going to do Y20, and that is actually something we're doing in partnership with Grasa Michelle Trust, who's in the room as well. Thank you for being here, Sino. And then later on in August, the 26th of August, we are doing the Startup 20. And that we are doing with Fitula. I could have sworn, there she is. So Fitula is also in the room. And then on the 11th of September, we are doing Business 20 with Entrepreneurship to the Point, also in the room. So again, yes, please, thank you. Can we have a round of applause to all of our fantastic partners who are going to, just like Anzisha, going to be leading this conversation from a technical perspective, from a technical point, from a point of the implementers who are on the ground. We welcome, all of these conversations. And then we are also getting a little aspirational. And so Andy earlier this year launched what we're calling the Andy Country Champions program. And so that now sees us having additional representation and conversations through some of our member ecosystem builders in their own space in other countries where we are not physically present. So we're hoping then that we're also going to have similar sessions like this happening in countries like Mozambique, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Rwanda. We already have a confirmation that a Youth 20 session is going to be happening in Bangladesh. And so all of these, the idea and the final product of this, and we're also hoping that, wink, wink, we might be able to do this in other countries as well. I don't know. But basically, what we are hoping is that at the end of all of this, so that you know where all of this goes to, what happens to your sticky notes, you must be wondering, as you part with them and leave your ideas on the table. We are going to be consolidating all of this into a report. And that report is going to be a recommendation, a set of recommendations document that we're going to hand over to Youth 20 so that they can take this and use it as, to support their own negotiations and their championing for some of these recommendations. Hopefully, some of these things that you guys have helped us come up with, that you guys have helped them come up with, are going to be reflected in those conversations and taken up into the agenda in November. But even if they're not, It was Rion, actually, from Y20 that put this so well. G20 is a moment in time. It's a little bit like a circus. Comes into town and it brings all this euphoria and we're all happy and we all want to gather about it. We want to do a whole thing. We set up the carnival, put up a tent, everybody buys tickets and we all go. But then when it leaves town, it takes the euphoria with it. And then we're all back to our day jobs and doing our thing and, we forget about it. The point of these conversations, we're hoping that we won't forget about them. These recommendations, if they get, the ones that get taken up into G20 policy, fantastic. You and I have contributed to global policy. Yay us. Yay youth in South Africa. The ones that don't, doesn't matter. They're still valid for us. They're still useful for us here. So do take these conversations and the spirit and inculcate it into your own spaces, into your own spheres of influence, irrespective. That's our hope. If we have motivated you guys to do this, then we've done well. So if you didn't know Andy, now you do. Look out for us. Look out for other convenings like this. We would love to have you. If you did know Andy, now you're an old friend and that's fantastic. So let's keep being friends. And with that, I would like to thank you all. Oh, I would also like to in particular thank the folks at Podcast Party for hosting us. So can we have a round of applause for this amazing venue? This is where we're going to be hosting all of our sessions. We think it's a great place to do so. So, but yeah, if you didn't know about this venue before and you do now, you're welcome.
I think what's just picking up on what he said, Africa is the youngest continent. And our productivity we are estimated to reach our productivity in 2050. So in every decision we make and every action we take and any recommendations that you guys will take from here, if you use that to say how do we then prepare the African continent for 2050 in terms of young people being economically viable as participants from trading in any way, I think that'll do us great. And also if you think of how do we then go about making sure that all these things that you're going to agree on and recommend are built as or sort of use the 2050 timeline working backwards to prepare ourselves for that productivity stage as a youngest continent in terms of age population. So if that is the case, because now if you can look at it, a lot of young people are migrating to different countries because majority of them have reached their productivity peak. And those numbers are going to increase. If we don't prepare ourselves for that, we're going to have a lot of skills shortage because we are not economical viable continent, simply because we're not creating economic opportunities through entrepreneurship for our young people. That would be the backbone, I believe, will drive these conversations going forward.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that what it also does is for the longest time, we've been talking about Vision 2030. And 2030 is in 5 years. So now you're kind of like telling us, cast our eyes to 2050 and work backwards. Okay. Yes, I remember now what the last thing I wanted to say. I wanted to, besides thank all of you, a reminder. We invited each one of you specifically. We did not put a whole thing on LinkedIn saying, if you've got time or want a free breakfast, come by. We said you and you and you and you. And so I wanted to, because we wanted to be so intentional about this conversation. So thank you so much for coming, for heeding and accepting our invitation and coming over. I also would like to thank our partners, not just our technical and implementation partners, but also our funders. This is a fantastic venue, but it's not free. So we had some support getting here, and so thank you for that. This particular session is actually being sponsored by Anglo-American Foundation and also the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation. So
would all know what advocates they are and supporters they are of youth and youth development. So we're thrilled to have them as our partners on this project.